Welcome to the Religious Treehouse. I'm Matthew.
And I'm Jody.
How are you doing today, Jody?
I'm doing okay. What I'm assuming is going to be my new favorite show is coming out today. So I'm
Oh,
just going to sit and watch all 8 episodes in one sitting. I'm very excited.
they're releasing all the episodes at once?
I think so. I'm not entirely sure. I could have looked that up before speaking,
Does
but
that Okay, cool. Congrats.
I mean, a lot of words. A lot of streaming services do that. They just drop all the episodes at once. So, or
Really?
if it's weekly, I'm fine. I like some anticipation.
Mm,
So, how are you?
I'm doing good. I don't have any new TV shows that I'm anticipating. Sorry. And I also don't know what just happened to my voice within like the past 5 minutes, so who knows what's going on. But Spotify just released their like all-time listening records, and I'm
Hmm.
so excited about that. It's been so much fun looking at like the songs that I've been unhealthily obsessed with, but it's been great. And we trust Spotify completely, even though they're a big, evil, rich corporation. We trust Spotify so much. And thank you for listening to us on Spotify. We appreciate all of our Spotify listeners, all of our Spotify listener. But
Listener.
listener. Oh, but no, this is great. I'm excited for our conversation today. I think it'll be a good one. But yeah, we're talking about Ezekiel, and I think
Hmm.
last time in our Habakkuk episode, we kind of talked about like prophetic sign acts and symbolic acts and stuff like that. So,
Yes.
like when and this is kind of a continuation of that conversation, but like when I think of like the iconic sign acts or symbolic acts, I often think of Ezekiel. So we're going to be looking at Ezekiel 3 through 5 specifically and talking
Oh,
about, some background on Ezekiel so we can like all be on the same page so we know what's going on with this guy. And then we'll talk about some famous sign acts of our good boy Zeke here.
okay.
But yeah, do you have any initial thoughts before we get into it?
Ezekiel was depressing.
Okay.
I think he needed to see a therapist.
Yeah. Oh, we'll talk
He,
about that. Yeah.
yeah,
But
God is very controlling
okay.
in this. It is not a good look for him,
Okay.
especially in the father role. Like
Okay.
I call CPS. The way he's
Sure.
treating Ezekiel, so toxic,
Sure.
so abusive.
Okay.
Okay, Ezekiel just needs a vacation from this man.
Okay.
That's my opinion,
Awesome.
but
Okay.
I'm sure it's misguided somewhere.
No, I think there is some truth to that. And we can figure out where we agree and disagree, but
Let's get
to
into
each
it.
their own. To each their own. Let's get into it. So Ezekiel, this kind of takes place in between the years 593 BCE through 571 BCE.
Mm,
So, and this is unique in that Ezekiel speaking from the exile. So Ezekiel is one of the exiled. Um, so in 597,
okay.
597 BCE, the um oh sorry, in 597, King Jehoiakim was exiled, and that kind of started the Babylonian exile.
Hmm.
It wasn't until 586 where we get the full temple destruction and everything goes up in flames.
Okay.
But at that time, there was an exile largely of like higher class priestly people and people in power, largely those type of people, but also a whole lot of others that were exiled starting in 1919 in 597
Mm,
BCE. So Ezekiel was part of that group that was exiled outside of Judah, outside of Jerusalem. So Ezekiel's really unique in that he's the only, or this book is the only prophetic literature that we have that speaks during that time period,
no.
after the exile, but before Cyrus, and the ramifications of Cyrus
Okay.
restoring the things in 539. And so that's really unique in that we have that here. All of our other like prophets, like Isaiah and stuff, do occur during this time period, but
Hmm.
they come from inside. Judah and Jerusalem and that area. So we get a very different perspective with Ezekiel, which is good.
Okay.
Some, top down stuff. Um, some scholars think that this was written in like the Persian period, so a little bit later, but generally most scholars agree that this is fairly contemporary with Ezekiel writing. Like perhaps even Ezekiel wrote this, or like disciples of Ezekiel. And for the most part, like scholars think this is like a unified work. Like there's not
Mm.
much composite additions and stuff. Like some scholars disagree and think that some parts are added and stuff. And there certainly are some redactions here and there throughout the book. But by and large, this is a unified piece of literature that was probably written around the time of Ezekiel and these prophecies, which is like from our conversations fairly rare in what we're talking about,
Yeah.
but for the prophets isn't like completely out there for the most part, especially with some of the minors.
Yeah.
So we can think of this as kind of a unified whole. The Masoretic text is about 5% longer than the Septuagint. So like that 5% is often considered additions of some sort, and they're often eschatological. Wow, eschatological in some form.
Um, Masoretic, did that come before or after the Septuagint?
So the Masoretic text is like 11th century CE stuff,
Mhm.
but it often preserves an older. Well, have we talked about Masoretic text, or is that just me talking with other
We've
people?
touched on it a
Cool.
little.
So the Masoretic text is often called the also called the Leningrad Codex.
Mhm.
Is the earliest complete manuscript we have of the Hebrew Bible,
Mm.
and it often preserves an older Hebrew, an older edition of the Bible than things like the Septuagint and other translations. In this case, the Septuagint is probably a little bit older, but yeah, we should talk
Okay.
about Masoretic text and stuff like that at some other point.
Making a note.
Making a note for sure. But yeah, so Ezekiel was likely from, or he was from a priestly family,
Mhm.
and was often like from what we see in the text was consulted by the elders and like had some important status in the community,
Mhm.
which explains why we get him as a prophet, but is also fairly unique in that he is a priest, like comes from a priestly family, but then also delves into, the whole realm of being a prophet.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, largely because this is happening outside of or during the exile outside of Judah, we get a lot of crisis and trauma literature. A
Mhm.
lot of scholars see this as some form of trauma literature of some form or another. And Ezekiel is trying to come to terms with this horrible exile of some sort, form or another.
I concur.
So, yeah, so some scholars try to like step this a little too far. And they're like, yeah, we can like really psychoanalyze Ezekiel. And this is like PTSD from the destruction of the temple and stuff like that. And like most scholars have like agreed that hey, that's stepping too far. We can't really get into the psyche of these biblical authors.
Like, we
But
can't sit this man on a couch.
right,
You can't
yeah.
determine that based on this writing.
And as you said, he needs to go to therapy, probably. But like we can't diagnose him from 2,500 years in the future.
No.
Uh, so yeah, largely this book can be seen as a way to like, work through trauma in that sense. And I think that's a fairly fruitful way to look at this text and helpful and a good true way to consider this text. Yeah, more largely, like there's so much to talk about Ezekiel. I'm just doing like a tiny little like drop in the bucket of things that are worth talking about. Structure wise, we can kind of set it up into three different sections, chapter 1 through 24, which
Mhm.
predate the destruction of the temple. So
Mhm.
what we're talking about today is going to be happening before the temple was destroyed, but still while Ezekiel was in exile. Then we
Okay.
have chapters 25 through 32, which aren't really topically organized, but just kind of like, or aren't really chronologically organized, but just kind of topically organized. So they're just kind of there. And we get chapter 33 through 48, which are going to be post dating the destruction
Mhm.
of the temple.
Got it.
So yeah, we see that Ezekiel's role, we see this in the verses that we'll talk about today, but his role is that of a watchman, warning the people of impending danger. And he also is kind of unique in emphasizing individual responsibility. So he does that throughout the text. But what I really like Ezekiel for, and what I think is really fun and important to look at, especially regarding prophets, but like throughout the Bible,
Hmm.
is paying attention to the bodies and how bodies act and play an important role throughout the text. So, like, we'll see a handful of things in chapters 3, 4, and 5, but like the way that his body moves and does things and acts and reacts and exists as an important tool to mediate prophecy, I think can't be overlooked. I think when we think of prophecy, we often think of like, hey, this guy is just saying one thing and then we're understanding. But throughout the Bible, I think prophecy is kind of mediated through movement and dance and visions and hearing. And if we reduce the prophetic idea of the Bible as just, hey, we're communicating on behalf of God, I think that gets, a good part of it, but it misses out on understanding what these prophets are trying to communicate to their intended audience.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my very brief thoughts on Ezekiel. Do you have any thoughts or comments on
On
anything going on
Ezekiel,
there?
um, just trying to wrap my head around. So he's exiled,
Yeah.
but there are people who are living within the exile, but within the system of the
Yeah.
prophet.
So Babylonians come and they
Mhm.
say, King Jehoiakim, get out of here. And also, we're going to exile a whole bunch of other people too. Like, get out of there. But there's still a lot of people remaining. Like, you don't
Okay.
just completely like get rid of everyone in the city and fill it with your own people. Like, there's
Mhm.
still remnants that remain.
And those are the people of Israel that Ezekiel needs to yell at.
Well,
The ones
well,
living in the city?
So Ezekiel's a prophet for the exile. He's talking to his exilic
Okay.
community. So he's
Okay.
talking to those in exile primarily.
Okay. So Ezekiel,
Mhm.
who has been displaced from his home,
Yeah,
has to go yell at other people who've been displaced from their homes
right.
due to no circumstances that they were a part of. Like,
Well, I mean, like they're very deeply a part of it. Like this is very central to their core. Like this exile that they were.
but not through any fault of their own.
Well, I mean, that's the question. That's the whole debate because in this time period, a lot of ideas of exiles and stuff like that. A lot of the idea was, hey, my God is fighting your God, and whoever's God is stronger wins. But one way to reframe this is, hey, it's not that your God beat my God. My God is still the strongest. My God is still the biggest, baddest, best God. But we, the people, messed up so badly that my very, very strong God allowed your God to beat us up as a punishment for what we did wrong.
Okay. I mean, the PTSD thing. That's abusive. That's mean. That's such a
Sure.
twisted way to look at it. Okay, but I
Well,
get it. I
yeah,
follow.
but it also solves the problem of, hey, why don't we have this temple that we were promised anymore? Why are we exiled? Because it can't be that our God is lost. It can't be that our God is bad. It must be that actually our God is allowing this to happen because we messed up. And yeah, that can be problematic for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But I think we need to understand it in that way to get into the mind frame of this audience.
Okay. And I'm not sure if they touched on what exactly it was they were doing wrong. Like,
Everything.
okay.
Yeah. So a lot of the prophets will look back to like the good old days, back when Israel was all, goody two shoes and we're doing things right.
Mhm.
Ezekiel, for the most part, is like, yeah, we were never good. It was always bad. We were always messing up. We were always unfaithful to our God. We were always sinning, yada yada yada. So
Ezekiel.
I don't know if we ever get into the specifics in Ezekiel, but
Okay.
a lot of times throughout the Bible, it'll be, oh, you worshiped other gods. Oh, you did yada yada. We married people who weren't Israelites, all that normal stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. All of that. Just stay with your one grouping,
Yeah,
listen to all the rules we say mentality.
sure. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so there's a lot going on there, and maybe I'm doing a little bit of disservice by simplifying it this much, but I think for the sake of this conversation,
Mhm.
that's enough that we need to know regarding the background, unless you have like more questions and thoughts.
About the background. Now, I want to get more into the exile. Like how did they I assume they just killed people and then forced them out of their homes.
Hmm.
Then they were just there. How
Yeah.
far away were they living from the city? What did exile look like? Were we in the desert? Are we back in the desert?
I mean, it's often talked about as that,
Mm.
using that exile language from Exodus, but like they relocated to different cities. So I think in the beginning, Ezekiel says he's in Nibur. Is that right? No. Oh, I could be wrong. And then I think Tel Aviv is also mentioned at one point. Um, Nippur. So yeah, he moved to Nippur. I don't know where Nippur is in context to this, but I mean, it's not like he's so far out of. It's not like, hey, I'm from California and I'm moving to Japan, but it's like, hey, I'm from Nevada and now I'm moving to Colorado or something. I don't know. Like
Okay.
they're in like geographically like close distance based on our standards, but still they're
Yeah.
like not part of the group anymore. They're far enough away to be like, hey, there's a difference for sure.
Okay.
But
I think that would lead me to do what Ezekiel does next.
well, I don't know about that. But so yeah, we can kind of get into chapters 3 through 5 now. One and two is like so 1, 2, and 3 is kind of like the call narrative of Ezekiel to
Mhm.
some extent. We get these visions of God's throne room and these exotic, crazy images that we can talk
Yeah.
about at other points when we talk about biblically accurate angels. But what we get in Ezekiel 3 is him kind of receiving a commission, and we
Mhm.
see God giving Ezekiel a scroll with lamentations and mourning and woe and bad news. And then God says, hey, Zeke. I always call Ezekiel Zeke. I think if I was friends with Ezekiel, he'd be like, you can call me Zeke.
Mm.
Hey, Zeke, eat this scroll. And he's like, oh my goodness, it tastes so sweet, like honey. And then he's sent to speak the words to the house of Israel, but they won't be willing to listen for the most part. And this is where we get Ezekiel being set as a watchman for the house of Israel to warn them of this impending doom and to like change their ways. And there
Dare
we
I
are.
pose? Ezekiel got on psychedelics when he ate the scroll.
Um, I mean, there's nothing in the text to indicate that.
What do you mean there's nothing in the text? The entirety of the text makes it seem like he's having some kind of mental breakdown or vision. And he's
Yeah.
like, hey, I ate this paper and it was sweet. Paper's not supposed to be sweet.
And that's the point. That's the point that we have this paper of lament and mourning and bad news, and Ezekiel's like, "Oh, tastes good, cool," which is weird, but
Crazy.
also like he's by eating the scroll, it's kind of similar to Jeremiah's call narrative as well, where God places words into Jeremiah's mouth.
Mm.
But Ezekiel, being from like the priestly family that he is, and so much of Ezekiel is connected with priestly language,
Yeah.
he's kind of taking into himself the fate of his people. Similar to like verses in Leviticus where the priest will like eat the sin offering. Ezekiel kind of being separated from the temple can't really remove the guilt. So we kind of enact these sign acts later in the upcoming chapters to be like, hey, I'm taking on this for you
Mhm.
as a way symbolically to talk about what's happening. if that kind of makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I'm just also posing he was drugged.
Sure. Like, but you can make that claim about anything. I think if we try to say, oh, this can be explained away by drugs, I think that loses the message that the authors are trying to push.
Yeah.
And I think it dismisses lived experiences of these visions and stuff like that that aren't drug induced per se. So by just looking at these texts and be like, oh, they're drugged. Who
Well,
cares?
no.
I think that that limits
I
both
just
both
wonder,
the interpretation for the religious person and for this appreciating it as an ancient and important text.
I just want to ponder upon the fact that normally in the few prophetic writings we have
Mhm.
looked at, it does not usually precede ingesting a substance. Like,
Um,
like this is the first one that we've tackled. So that's just why my brain is going. And
yeah.
what was in it?
Well, I mean, but like, let's think about the prophets that we've talked about. We've talked about Habakkuk, who's
Mhm.
tightly connected with
Food.
um with food, as we see in Bel and the Dragon, and we talk about
Yeah.
Jonah, who has that plant that he's tightly connected to,
Mm.
the gourd,
Mm.
as it's sometimes translated to. Like, so the idea of food and profit is very common. And
Yeah.
Jeremiah, we have God inserting his words into his mouth. So ingesting food and ingesting words and, inserting food and knowledge and words is a fairly common trait in prophetic
Okay.
literature.
Okay. I can accept that.
Yeah.
I
Now,
can
were
accept
they
that.
all on psychedelics? Maybe, but I don't think that's the point that we should be taking
Well,
from these texts.
and if they were, who cares? It does not make it any less. I don't think it detracts from it. In my, but I have a very nice view of psychedelics. That to me is just like, I think psychedelics open the mind. I feel that if someone told me that they had a message from God and they had it on mushrooms, I would be more likely to believe them.
Have you looked into like the Good Friday experiment and stuff like that?
I feel like we've touched on it, like in our text messages.
Okay.
Okay.
This is a conversation for another time. We're talking about
Another day.
Ezekiel, right? Okay.
Ezekiel. Okay, God's emotionally blackmailing him and telling him, if you don't tell them this, I'm going to kill them and it's your fault. What's up with that?
That's another common trait in prophecy. So
Okay.
what we have in chapter 3 is kind of two groups. There's
Yeah.
like the doomed wicked people that like Ezekiel's gonna like talk to, and like they're not gonna listen, and like so what? But if he doesn't talk to them, it's on Ezekiel. Like, but now that Ezekiel's talked to them, they're still gonna be doomed because they're not changing their ways. But now it's off Ezekiel's back. Like Ezekiel can't be blamed anymore. And then Ezekiel's also talking to like the backsliding righteous. And for them, if Ezekiel talks to them and it succeeds, then they are also saved. But if Ezekiel doesn't talk to them, then Ezekiel is doomed because he didn't do his duty, and they're also doomed.
It's just
So
so manipulative.
yeah, but this is like a fairly common trope in prophetic literature,
And
and
just
like
because it's common doesn't mean it should be normalized.
sure, but like the literary conventions and stuff that are happening here like makes this fairly common and not out of the realm.
Yeah.
And like we do get a sense of like Ezekiel consenting to this. Like this is like he kind of takes on the role of priest and prophet, and while not consenting to the specifics of it per se, like this is his role, this is his job that
And you
he
consent while
agrees
under
to.
duress.
What do you mean?
Well, okay, he's priestly,
Uh,
so he knows like that there's going to be consequences, the bad. He's in a traumatic situation where he has been displaced from his home
right.
and he's basically being held at gunpoint by God. I don't know. You've
Yeah.
already read my notes on this. You knew it was going to be a long one. Okay. I'm going to stop chiming in about the abuse. I
But
just
but
think
I do think I think this is a valid interpretation, and I think looking into this from I don't know, I would call this would this be a trauma-backed interpretation, a it's not really a feminist interpretation per se, though I think like you can see similarities within feminist
Yeah.
thought and things happening here, even though no women are talked about. I think there are valid ways to look at this and critique God for the way that God is acting in so many of the prophetic books.
Yeah.
Like oh my, in Hosea, I talk about a critique of God there. But I think I think it's good that we acknowledge this. I think it's good
Mhm.
that we acknowledged, hey, this isn't right in our books. And I think we can hold that there and remember
Mhm.
that, hey, this isn't good. And also we can look at, hey, what are these authors trying to convey in their period? And I think both are equally valid
Okay.
interpretations. So I'm very glad that we brought this up as, hey, something we can talk about. But
This was also just how it went.
yeah, yeah, which is bad and shouldn't be,
Yeah.
hey, this is how it should be as well.
Yeah.
But this is how it was, and here's how we interpret it from whatever lens that we look on.
Yeah.
And what is striking about your interpretive lens that we have on here is that it goes against the you know white European traditional interpretation of Christian or Jewish interpretation of saying, hey, yeah, go God, God's the good guy, or justified in this bad thing. And that's why it might be striking to listeners because it goes against those traditional non-biased interpretive lenses. So as long as I think when we're naming these interpretive choices that we're making
Mhm.
as historical critical, as um, a trauma lens, which I think is how Ezekiel's commonly read in in with these lenses
Mhm.
categorized.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we like label them as such, so that when we talk about the white European lens that we look through that, we don't recognize that as the normative lens, but that
Yeah.
is the European straight white whatever lens that we're talking about there. That was another tangent. We love all the tangents that we're going on
We
here.
love a tangent. Okay, so Ezekiel has been tasked.
Mhm.
He ate the paper, he has the words, he must speak them, or else people will die and it's his fault. And then
Yeah.
what happens?
So we get to what is it, the end of chapter 3, and then we get Ezekiel being silenced, which is so fun because this kind of enacts the ability for Ezekiel to kind of have to do these sign acts, these symbolic acts. Because like for chapters and chapters, like Ezekiel is silenced, and then like I don't remember what chapter it is, but down the line, it's like, oh yeah, remember that Ezekiel can't talk unless like I allow him to talk for my prophetic like urges. Oh yeah, we'll let him talk now. Oh, which is
More
such
abuse.
sure, sure.
More
I think
abuse. He's isolating him. He's making him unable to speak to other people about what he's going through so he can properly process this.
mhm. Um, but yeah, so now we have a silent Ezekiel,
Poor
and
Ezekiel.
then for the most part, unless God's like, "Hey, prophesy for me,"
Yeah, unless
and
God
then
says speak.
yeah, and then in chapter 4 we get the siege of Jerusalem kind of reimagined.
Hmm.
Ezekiel is told to build model Jerusalem and let it be in a state of siege. And then he lies on his left side for 390 days to symbolize 390 years that Israel will be in guilt. And then 40 days on his right side to symbolize the days that Judah is in guilt. Um, these numbers aren't historical. We don't know why
Oh,
these numbers per se are chosen.
fun.
Uh, the Septuagint, I think, instead of 390 has 150.
Oh,
Again, not much explanation for that, but it's to kind of symbolize, hey, the Northern Kingdom messed up 390 years, Southern Kingdom's going to be 40 years. Oh,
so now God is forcing Ezekiel to bed rot and go into a period of self-neglect.
yeah. But I think looking at I think if we look at this as prophetic mediation, looking at this as prophetic, as this as prophecy in just as much as any other verbal prophecy that we may be accustomed to. I think it's putting a very important message across because we're what Ezekiel's doing, especially in these two chapters here, 4 and 5, is he's showing the people that he's around, like street theater. This is street theater. He's saying, "Hey, look at remember that thing that happened in Jerusalem and like
Mm,
we were exiled? Like
mm.
remember that." It's it conveys this message far more than just saying, "Hey, remember that like we were exiled and like bad things happened." But instead he's like physically enacting and reenacting this exile, this siege on Jerusalem, not as a way for them to be like, "Oh yeah, that was rough," but to like remember the situation that they're in, to give them like this hope to some extent, like, "Hey, there is a way out of this because we're still here, and like there is a God doing all the God stuff and it's powerful and all that." But also, "Hey, we messed up and this is bad."
So where is he doing this? Like in the middle of a square
Yeah, like
on a street? Is he like one of those guys that paint themselves gold and then pretends to be a statue all day?
yeah, like this is prophetic street theater. This
Okay.
is like I'm trying to think of what what like a similar thing that
Chris
may have
Angel
happened.
in the box.
Sure, Chris Angel in a box, maybe more relevant. Like I think of like French climate change protesters.
Oh yeah. Oh, did you
Um,
see those ones outside of the Louvre, the shirtless women who were protesting against the Epstein files?
I didn't
And
see that,
it was beautiful. Okay.
but I think off the top of my head, like the I don't know why French, why I always think of like these French protesters, but French climate change protesters and stuff like that, where or Banksy. I think Banksy is another great
Oh.
example who maybe
Mm,
doesn't use like his body as much, but rather like artistic expression. But
mm.
there's still a prophetic critique happening, a prophetic commentary being kind of put in the public square to be observed and remembered.
I
And
think of Dismaland all the time. So
Dismaland,
it was a Banksy Disneyland.
oh,
I need to show you. It's so good. It's so good. The French, no one protests like them, but no one does protest art like Banksy.
yeah,
My goodness. Okay, so now I'm wrapping my head. So he's built a model and now he's laying on the ground outside and people are walking by him every day.
yeah. That's the image that we're supposed to
Okay.
be getting here for
Okay.
sure. Yeah, I think I think of French Banksy is how we think of Ezekiel. Um, yeah, I'm gonna go with that.
Ezekiel's French Banksy. I like it.
Ezekiel is French Banksy.
Now let's get into, are we ready to get into the really gross thing?
Sure.
Because I'm ready to get into the really gross thing. And it isn't even the ingredients in this bread because God's like, here's what you're going to eat. And
Yeah.
it's made with like millet and wheat,
Mm.
lentils. That's fine. Cooked on dung, cooked on dung. And then Ezekiel's like, actually, I'm a vegetarian. And he's like, oh, then cow dung. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be human dung. You can cook it on cow dung. I mean, consider it, but still.
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot to be said here.
Okay.
And what we see, I think, is a connection to Ezekiel's priestly ties. So in is it Leviticus? Like we're connecting, like so much of Ezekiel connects back to Leviticus,
Mhm.
but it is unclean to eat over human dung, apparently, like purity wise. And so
Yes.
Ezekiel's like, "Hey God, this isn't okay," and God's like, "Okay, sure, that's all right," and because Ezekiel's like very concerned about like priestly purity in
Mm.
that sense. And so God relents and says, "Okay, cool, we can do cow dung." And I've seen some interpreters, I think there could be something to this, that shows that this is not God's wrath just going unfettered. This is like, hey, God steps like God's expectations for Israel in the priestly in the imagination of the prophetic writings wasn't out like outrageously tight, but
Mhm.
like God bends and negotiates with prophets and the people, and we see that here. And I think that's a fun, cool interpretive lens.
Yeah.
Like, hey, God's not this unreasonable dictator that's just gonna like say do X, Y, and Z, but he'll bend every once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what an abuser does.
Yeah,
They abuse you and then give you a treat. So you're like, they're not that bad. And then they abuse you more.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what happens.
right. But one of my favorite things in like modern interpretation of
Mhm.
particularly Ezekiel, um, and chapter 4:9
Mhm.
is the commodification and creation of Ezekiel bread.
Don't even, don't
Which
even get me started.
are you familiar with Ezekiel bread?
Oh, very familiar. How familiar are you?
I'm familiar with Ezekiel bread conceptually as like, hey, I know this is a thing that exists that some people eat for some reason, and it's like sold in like health food stores, and is often like, hey, this is like godly and nutritious and delicious and holy and godly and from the Bible. So amen, hallelujah.
Yeah. Here's the thing. So I don't believe it has gluten. So
Okay.
for people who are gluten intolerant or have polycystic ovarian syndrome, now called polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome, it was retitled yesterday.
Oh,
Super exciting. Um, but it's just since there's no gluten, your body doesn't have like your body can process it
okay.
easier, except it comes frozen. And then it's hard to toast. And what am I supposed to do with it? And there's different flavors, and they come in colorful packages, and it says Ezekiel, and then it has the scripture right under it.
Yeah, Ezekiel 4:9.
Yep.
But what is so funny about this and what completely misses the point is that this is marketed as like nutritious and delicious, but Ezekiel bread is like that misses the entire point of the narrative that's happening here. This isn't like Ezekiel like making healthy and good food for him. This is a a diet where Ezekiel is limiting his food, he's rationing his food and his beverage, and like eating this food in forced exile that is essentially like prisoners' food that he's finding from the trash. Like that
Yep.
is what we're supposed to like read this and understand it as. Like, oh, Ezekiel is eating the scraps from the trash of this prisoner's food pile. And it's like, no, this is bad. This is representing the exile in how they're living in the exile and away from their customs and food and stuff like that. And they're famished and not eating enough and starving. And so Ezekiel is eating this non nutritious, bad, lowly food that is not good for him. And then, like, modern capitalism is like, yes, we can capitalize on that and sell Ezekiel bread and market it as health food.
No, I saw this TikToker and she's like, let's make Ezekiel bread. We're gonna put in this, this, and this. And this, I saw this like last week when
Oh,
I probably should have read this so I would have more of an understanding of it. Because that would have been nice at the time. I didn't like the video, proud of myself for that. But she was talking about like all the health benefits, and this is how God wants us to eat. And now
yeah.
I'm looking at this and I'm going, wait a second, that was a control tactic by God towards Ezekiel. Wait a minute.
I, I love that you're fixating on this being a control tactic. Um, yeah, but and all that being said, to make it true Ezekiel bread, it would have to be cooked over
Dumb.
dung, human dung, if not cow. So hopefully these people aren't cooking it over dung, but who's to say?
Who's to say? The only thing I think dung is good for is fertilizer, but that's just me.
Ugh.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's Ezekiel in chapter 4 being like, hey, food and water and laying on my side. And so that often that is representing like the siege of Jerusalem and the
Okay.
bad things that's happening there, and like, hey, we can't eat, we're starving, we're hungry, things are going bad,
Mhm.
it's happening for a really long time. Remember this. Uh-oh.
Oh.
Uh-oh. And then we get to chapter 5,
Mhm.
which I don't have a ton to say about.
Oh.
I'm sure you do. But we get kind of these instructions from God to completely shave his hair.
Mhm.
Presumably, he's been lying on the ground for the past 430 days,
Yeah.
and not been eating much. So he's got hair to shave. So he shaves all his hair off, and then God says a third of it needs to be destroyed by fire, a third of it needs to be destroyed by the sword, and a third of it can be like scattered in the wind.
Yeah.
And this is like representing the the exile from Jerusalem. A
Mhm.
third of the people kind of destroyed in Jerusalem in the fire, a
Yeah.
third of the people kind of exiled out,
Mhm.
and a third of the people killed by war and stuff like that,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
is devastating and bad. Like this is not Ezekiel being like, "Hey, everything's okay." This is Ezekiel saying, "Hey, everything's not okay."
No, it's not okay. God's making him mutilate himself
Yeah.
in
And
order for a sideshow performance.
yeah, but also like this is prophetic mediation. And I think reducing it to just a sideshow performance is missing the point that the text is trying to make. It should also be noted that at no point does Ezekiel do these things. It's only God telling Ezekiel to do these things. We don't get any reports of Ezekiel actually doing these things. It can be assumed that like the assumed reading is like, okay, then Ezekiel did these things.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that the acknowledgement is that this is the body. We're imagining Ezekiel's body doing these things,
Mhm.
and the prophetic body is what is manifesting or mediating this dialogue between God and the prophet.
Mhm.
And by focusing on the body, which I think often gets overlooked, we can see how this prophecy is being mediated to the
Yeah.
people. And because like countless like throughout this time his body's on the move and in pain and in distress and not where it belongs, just as the people are not where they belong in
Mhm.
this exile. And so this is Ezekiel communicating to his fellow people in exile, we are not where we belong. This is not a good situation that we're in. And thus Ezekiel as the watchman, as his role as the watchman, is trying to send this message of repentance and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. I see that. I hear you. I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
But like, why is Ezekiel's life so meaningless that he has to be the one to do this? To like, there's this conversation on free will I now want to have because
Okay.
he has none of his own. He doesn't get to live. He If we're going based off these numbers, he dedicates over a year of his life. And I'm guessing it's
Okay.
more than that
Yeah.
to preaching and telling and all to save other people. And not that that isn't good and, selfless and everything.
Hmm.
But at the same time, he's not really given a choice. And I hate that for him.
Yeah, no, Ezekiel covers 26 years
Oh my gosh. It's a
of
long time.
26 years? 20 21 years. 20 some odd years. Um where this is his role. But like I, I don't think that's the point that they're trying to make. I don't think the point is, oh my goodness, this guy is being used and abused for that long. It's like this guy's our idea of religion and religious devotion and their idea, I think, is very different. And this wasn't seen so much. I mean, to an extent, it was, but it wasn't seen so much as an obligation, but a an opportunity, I suppose. Like, I don't think looking at this and the message that they're trying to send, the message that they're trying to get us to take away with is, oh my goodness, this guy lived such a hard life and God made him do it. I
Yeah.
think if that's what we're focusing on here, I think that misses the entire point of both what the biblical authors intended and what the past 2,500 years of interpretation have come across with. That's not to say that you're wrong, but it is to say that there's a lot more happening here than just,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, bad things happened to this guy. And I think we can recognize that, but we should also be able to move past it and see the other things that are happening here.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I can see the other things, but because that is the message that's trying to get across, I'm wondering who's sitting there advocating for Ezekiel,
Right. Right.
being like, where is his time to enjoy this life he has been given? If life is a gift and you're supposed to live that life, and he is dedicating his life to God,
Uh-huh.
then I think there should be some, how do I want to say this? Some compensation
Sure.
from God for this, because it is a precious life. And if Ezekiel is spending his precious life spreading this message and doing God's bidding,
Hmm.
then Ezekiel is worthy of some kind of fruit for his labor. So,
And I think the problem with that argument is that we have different philosophical frameworks, and I don't think that this is necessarily engaging in that framework, and I don't think it's necessarily starting with the idea that this life is a gift. And I do think that the reward is like, hey, hopefully there will be redemption for their people. I think that is the reward that is hopefully being promised.
so selfless. I like Ezekiel.
Yeah, he's a
I
good
don't.
guy. It's a fun book, and
Yeah.
it's, for a book, not too long, for a biblical book, fairly long, but it's a
Yeah,
fun
sure. Sure, Jonah was swallowed by a big fish, but it was
one.
just like, expedient travel.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Jonah went through some stuff, I guess, but Ezekiel,
Mhm.
goodness. Okay. What else?
Yeah, I think we went through a lot of this. I fear I got preachy, and I didn't mean to get preachy at any point
You
during
didn't.
this.
No,
But
I'm just being obstinate today.
no, Ezekiel's just such a fun book. And my main takeaway, the takeaway that I want from this is
Mhm.
that we should pay attention to the bodies of prophets and the people
Yeah.
and all of the bodies and how they respond to prophecy and how they enact prophecy and how they mediate between different people. Because I think that is something that's very important and gets overlooked.
Okay.
So that's the main takeaway. How does the prophetic body mediate prophecy, and how do bodies respond to this prophecy?
Got it.
Which we've talked about in Habakkuk and Jonah and stuff like that,
Mhm.
but it does tend to get overlooked. Well, thank you all for listening to this episode. Please like and subscribe and share this with your dentist, and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Bluesky. Listen to us on Spotify and Apple and Amazon. Email us at theriligioustreehouse@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. Tell us where we're wrong, or where you wanted us to talk more about, or what you wanted us to talk less about. Send critiques to me, compliments to Jodie, and I think I'm looking forward to whatever our next conversation is. I have no idea what it is, but it'll be a great one, and I'm so excited for it. But yeah, thank you all. Have a great rest of your morning, because you listen to this in the morning is my idea. I don't
Our
know.
one listener.
Our one listener
What
listens
time
in
do you listen?
the morning. All right, bye all.
Bye. God's mean. God's mean and abusive to poor little Ezekiel. Ezekiel's just trying to be the best boy he can be. And God's saying, do more.
Yeah, I you definitely have you're fighting with God and Ezekiel, and that's fun. I support this. Like, fight with God more.
Someone needs to be on Ezekiel's side,
Yeah.
and it shall be me.